Tulsa Public Schools are in the process of setting up their budget for the upcoming school year. The district treasurer says it's not looking good. He's anticipating $3 million less from the state. That's after the district has cut all it could.
State aid is down about $20 million for us alone over the past 4 or 5 years. That whole time, the student population across the state has grown by about 30,000.
Now, a big chunk of the Tulsa Public School District's budget comes from property tax.
There's enough money owed to make up the district's shortfall of $20 million. That's according to records from the Tulsa County Treasurer's Office.
2 News investigators and Marla Carter pored over those property taxes owed in Tulsa County for the past year, 2012. Now, the investigators show us who's not paying and who it hurts.
1/8, 1/8, 1/8.
For Miss A, her math problem,
How many eighths does it take to equal 1 whole?
is figuring out how to get 25 desks in a 300-square-foot classroom.
Space is a precious commodity here. What's the top number called?
With 25 students, this Burroughs Elementary room is a tight fit.
People don't talk about the physical environment and the physical limitations of the classroom as well when you have 25 to 30 students. I've had multiple kids bonk their heads with each other when they're just trying to scoot out their chairs.
Across town, there are open seats at this movie theater at 103rd and Memorial. Star World 20, like many other businesses, are helping fund schools through property taxes. Except the county treasurer says this theater didn't pay up in 2012. Theater owner Spirit Master Funding, owned by Thomas H. Nolan, owes $126,000, the most for last year alone.
So if you can give us a call back, that'd be great.
We called the Arizona-based company, but they didn't return our calls. And they're not alone. The 2 News investigators poured over 1,000 pages of 18,000 properties owned by individuals and businesses that owe taxes for the year of 2012 at a grand total of $20 million when you add in interest. Record show number 2 on the list is Resource One. It's a direct marketing firm and owes $122 grand in property taxes. They too didn't return our calls. Then there's this shopping center at 61st and South Memorial, Eaton Square. Its former owner, Transcontinental Realty out of Dallas, owes $107,000 for 2012, according to the treasurer's office. Its CEO didn't call us back either, but that's just 2012. Our investigators dug deeper than just into these 1,000 pages. The investigators found the theater actually owes another 10 grand more in interest, making its grand total $136,000. And records show that Resource One did not pay in 2012 or in 2011 as well. They actually owe a grand total of $286,000. And Eaton Square owes more than $500,000 when you add up their back taxes and interest, still going all the way back to 2009.
It's a lot of money.
But we didn't stop there. We found one business owes taxes on 100 properties. Brightside Properties owns and rents out dozens of homes. They owe $201,000 in taxes for the past 3 years. The owner, Rod Sperlin, didn't answer the door or return our calls. We wanted to know what happens to these violators. So we went to the Tulsa County Treasurer's office.
If they're not paid, they begin accruing interest at the rate of 1.5% per month.
For the property owners here and the thousands of others who still owe for last year, that interest started accruing on May 15th. Eventually, after 3.5 years, if the property taxes and interest are not paid,
The property will be sold for non-payment of taxes.
and Eaton Square is one of those properties ready to be sold for back taxes. However, we talked to the new owner, U.S. Acquisition Properties out of Denver, and they are planning to pay $146,000 of those back taxes by the end of the month to keep it from being sold. They also told 2 News they plan to pay the rest of the taxes owed by the previous owner over time. In a statement, they said, "We just took title of the property in the past 30 days. We have been getting our arms around the property and what needs to be addressed." But for the rest of the property owners who owe back taxes, every dollar not paid can't help the services it is supposed to fund. 46% of property taxes goes to county services like the library and the health department. The other 54% all goes to schools. That means just the money owed in property taxes for 2012, the money that would go to schools, could pay the salaries for 200 TPS teachers.
Those should be equal.
For Miss A, that solution could mean fewer students in her classroom, more room for the children, and more room to learn.
Well, you think that at some point in time, I don't know if it's getting community, parents involved, that we recognize the ramifications of these large class sizes on our students.
Again, there are more than 18,000 properties on the list of delinquent taxes, and over the next few months, we'll continue to dig deeper into who owes and just how badly it affects our schools and our community. To see a list of the top 10 businesses on who owes the most, just head over to our website, KJRH.com, and look for this story under investigations. Marla Carter, 2 News works for you.
In a 2 News investigation, Oklahoma overdue. Schools are struggling financially, and lawmakers say that funding is less now than it was 4 years ago.
The 2 News investigators discovered a serious delay in state funding. In fact, it's so bad that districts won't see the money until next year.
2 News investigator Marla Carter uncovers the state's delinquent tax bill.
Go ahead and go to the start menu.
It's almost school time again. Property taxes help your kid's classroom, like paying for teachers and textbooks.
That's really cool.
Paid by property owners like Robertson Tire.
We have 17 properties in Tulsa County and 5 in Rogers County and 1 in Wagner County.
And all of that adds up to $150,000 a year in property taxes. Well, Robertson and many businesses across Green Country pay that bill on time. Thousands are late. In May, the 2 News investigators exposed some companies that owe hundreds of thousands of dollars. This time, we went digging for the worst offender, the one who owes the most in unpaid property taxes for Tulsa County. That offender, the state of Oklahoma.
So the state of Oklahoma doesn't have a deadline of when that money's due.
That's right.
I don't know how they can get away with that.
The 2 News investigators pored over delinquent property taxes and found the state of Oklahoma owes almost $2 million to Tulsa County.
Do you think it's fair that the state has more time than everybody else to pay? Is that fair?
The state is providing the money, and we could not be constitutionally in position to make that payment if there are no funds available.
Jeff Spellman is over property taxes for the state. The fund he's talking about pays the property taxes for hundreds of Oklahoma businesses. So here's the problem. It's a math problem. The state owes 50-some counties a total of $46 million. The fund to pay for those property taxes only gets $20 million a year, half of what it needs, leaving $26 million that the state can't pay on time.
Usually that money will be available probably by January of the following year.
January of the following year. That's a year after your property taxes are due.
What kind of word was that?
The tax commission says its hands are tied, and it can only reimburse schools and counties once it gets more money.
The state of Oklahoma can't pay to the counties any money they don't have.
Yes, Micah.
Meanwhile, schools wait. At her State of the State 2 weeks ago, Governor Fallon proclaimed education as one of her top goals.
We've tried in my budget over the years to protect education as much as possible.
Knowing her mission is to fund education, we wanted to ask the governor why the state takes so long paying its tax bill to fund schools. For weeks, we tried to set up an interview and get answers from the state's top government official. But her office repeatedly turned us down. Finally, we caught up with her at the State of the State 2 weeks ago and asked her about the delay in payment. She said a fix is up to the legislature.
I'm always happy to look at any issue. It's hard to make a judgment call on legislation until it's written and until the issue is thoroughly discussed, but I'm certainly open to listen to any type of suggestions of how we can improve that for our communities and certainly for education.
That's not good enough for State Senator Sean Burridge.
We definitely need to find a way to pay our bills on time. We owe that to the citizens.
After what we told him, Burridge is working on a legislative fix.
I'd like to talk to the Senate leadership, both Democrat and Republican. We can look for maybe a legislative fix, some way to maybe ease the pain on these school districts and get our bills paid on time.
We're excited to be able to...
Now we'll just have to see if the governor takes a look at it as promised.
Get them paid early, take care of our schools.
What was the link, Jessica?
Meanwhile, schools are dealing with a smaller budget for textbooks and larger class sizes. There are fewer resources and individual attention for each child. Marla Carter, 2 News works for you.
Now, since we started asking the state why it hasn't paid up on property taxes, it paid $300,000 to Tulsa County.
With school now underway, many districts are short on funding. Property taxes pay for teachers' salaries and textbooks and computers.
But the 2 News investigators found that some businesses owe hundreds of thousands of dollars in back taxes, money that could pay teachers' salaries. Well, after what investigator Marla Carter uncovered, one business decided to pay up.
For months, the 2 News investigators have been pouring through documents, looking at who hasn't paid their taxes still for 2011. Some of the worst offenders are businesses. In May, we told you about 3 businesses that owed the most in delinquent property taxes for 2012. Combined, the trio owed $900,000 in back taxes. Second on the list was Resource One, a marketing firm out of North Tulsa. Monday of this week, it still owed $297,000 in late taxes from 2011 and 2012. After we called Resource One, telling them about our upcoming special on property taxes, we asked them why they hadn't paid up. And suddenly, the company paid the next day, after being behind for 2 years. Once that money is divvied up in the county, just its share could pay the salaries of 5 teachers. But that's just the beginning. The investigators found millions of dollars still owed just in Tulsa County. Find out who's not paying and how it's affecting your child's school. Watch our 30-minute special this Friday at 7 o'clock. We're tracking your tax dollars. Marla Carter, 2 News works for you.
Marla, thanks. Now, we asked Resource One to comment on why it was behind on property taxes. They didn't respond.
We have lost a lot of resources that we used to have. We've cut aides and we've cut teaching positions. And
school is back in session. Class sizes have gotten larger and teachers are doing more with less. It all comes down to school funding. Currently, schools have less money to operate with than they did 4 years ago. But there is more than enough money to make up for the funding shortfall if people and businesses would pay their property taxes on time.
I don't know how they can get away with that.
Good evening, I'm Karen Larson.
And I'm Russ McCaskey. In the next half hour, the 2 News investigators will be tracking your tax dollars. Every year, you're taxed on income and property, but many don't pay their taxes.
During this show, we will expose big businesses that are hundreds of thousands of dollars behind in their property taxes. And we'll introduce you to the person in Tulsa County who owes the most in back property taxes. You'll be shocked by the lifestyle she keeps.
So how big is the problem? Here are the facts. Property taxes for 2012 were due by the end of March. Now, the good news is fewer than 10% of property owners in Tulsa County did not pay their taxes. The 2 News investigators asked for a list of those who did not pay back in April. The bad news is the list of delinquent properties for 2012 still ended up being more than 1,000 pages long.
Now, these documents represent, as of today, more than 13,000 properties behind in taxes. The amount of money still owed to Tulsa County totals $12.4 million.
You pay your taxes, so why should you care about those who don't? Because the majority of property taxes help fund our schools, paying for teachers, textbooks, computers, all the tools your children need to learn.
2 News investigator Marla Carter and the investigators team have spent over 200 hours tracking unpaid property taxes, and she joins us now with the results of this investigation.
Well, Russ and Karen, this stack of papers represents all of those delinquent properties. And Tulsa Public Schools started last week understaffed by more than 40 teachers. And even if those were filled, the class sizes are still large. But the money these documents represent, 13,000 delinquent properties and more than $12 million, could go a long way to make up a lack of funding.
Now, Marla, when we think of delinquent property taxes, we think of perhaps homeowners, but they actually make up a very small portion of those who don't pay.
That's right. And looking at the top amount of unpaid taxes, we found businesses make up most of the list.
1/8, 1/8, 1/8.
For Miss A, her math problem,
How many eighths does it take to equal one whole?
is figuring out how to get 25 desks in a 300-square-foot classroom.
Space is a precious commodity here. What's the top number called?
With 25 students, this Burroughs Elementary room is a tight fit.
People don't talk about the physical environment and the physical limitations of the classroom as well when you have 25 to 30 students. I've had multiple kids bonk their heads with each other when they're just trying to scoot out their chairs.
Businesses make up the majority of delinquent property taxes. Taxes still owed for last year and are not available to help fund the schools. Businesses like this shopping center, 61st and South Memorial, Eaton Square. Its former owner, Transcontinental Realty out of Dallas, owes $120,000 for 2012, according to the county treasurer's office. We called the company's CEO. He did not return our calls. But that's just 2012. Our investigation dug deeper than just into these 1,000 pages from last year. Records show that Eaton Square owes $390,000 when you add up their back taxes and interest, going back to 2010. But we didn't stop there. We found one business owes taxes on 100 properties. Brightside Properties owns and rents out dozens of homes. They owe $201,000 in taxes for the past 3 years. The owner, Rod Sperlin, didn't answer the door or return our calls. We wanted to know what happens to these violators. So we went to the Tulsa County Treasurer's office.
If they're not paid, they begin accruing interest at the rate of 1.5% per month.
For the property owners here and the thousands of others who still owe for last year, that interest started accruing on May 15th. Eventually, after 3.5 years, if the property taxes and interest are not paid,
The property will be sold for non-payment of taxes.
and Eaton Square is one of those properties that was ready to be sold for back taxes back in June. However, we talked to the new owner, U.S. Acquisition Properties out of Denver in May, and they paid enough of those back taxes by the end of May to keep it from being sold. And they also told 2 News they do plan to pay the rest of the taxes owed by the previous owner over time. If the property taxes on just Eaton Square and Brightside Properties were brought up to date, it would be enough to pay the starting salaries of 16 more teachers.
Those should be equal.
For Miss A, that solution could mean fewer students in her classroom, more room for the children, and more room to learn.
Well, you think that at some point in time, I don't know if it's getting community, parents involved, that we recognize the ramifications of these large class sizes on our students.
Depending on the district, anywhere between 50 and 75% of your property taxes goes to fund education. The rest is split up to help fund other county services, such as the health department, libraries, and county jobs. But education takes the biggest chunk of the property tax pie. 2 News reporter Pete Knutson shows us the people delinquent taxes hurt the most.
So this is a letter that I have written to you so that you can get to know me a little bit.
One of the first assignments for the kids in Mr. Parsons' 5th grade class this year.
You're going to tell me about you.
Writing him letters so he gets to know each and every student, all 27. A big number that concerns Mr. Parsons.
And so if you have 27 kids as opposed to 20, the classroom environment's just different. And then C, you guys go to music.
The reason for larger class sizes, educators say, the lack of state funding, made worse by property taxes that go unpaid. The Union District, for example, shortchanged by nearly $900,000 because of those overdue property tax payments.
It makes me angry.
Liz Martin has 3 kids in Union schools and is active in the PTA. Zach's classes in 6th grade are pushing 30, she says, and her other kids, a freshman and junior, have classes pushing 40. Some rooms don't even have enough desks. And even though Liz says teachers do a wonderful job, those class sizes make one-on-one attention for her kids and every student difficult.
It's frustrating when I know that they're not getting the contact with their teacher.
Union administrators say they could make good use of that $900,000 in uncollected property tax money. It's enough to hire 20 more teachers and additional classroom aides. That's enough to staff an entire elementary school. And they'd offer more tutoring, too, they say, to kids who need it. But some property owners just aren't paying up.
That everybody should pay their share. Everybody benefits from a good school system.
District administrators say when you take those unpaid property taxes and add the loss of more than $5 million in general state funding since 2008, It's a 1-2 financial punch.
We have lost a lot of resources that we used to have. We've cut aides and we've cut teaching positions. And
no matter, Mr. Parsons says.
If you're going to tell me anything else that you want me to know about you.
He'll enjoy getting to know and teach every student in his class, no matter how many there are. Pete Knutson, 2 News works for you.
After reviewing thousands of records identifying 13,000 business owners and residents who haven't paid their property tax, we found the one person who owes the most on their home property taxes, and her name is Lori Parsons.
This is Lori Parsons, seen here at a golf tournament. She is the president and sole owner of Builders Steel Company Incorporated here in Tulsa. It's a construction company that, according to industry websites, has annual sales of around $10 million. She lives in a large home that's equipped with a theater room with leather seats, a fitness room, 11 baths, 7 bedrooms, and an in-ground pool, complete with her monogram in the tile bottom. Lori Parsons, who owns the home with her husband Brent, has been in the news lately. Earlier this month, Lori and Brent pleaded guilty to federal corruption charges. The charges were the result of a multi-million-dollar plan involving construction projects for the Choctaw Nation. According to court documents, the Parsons used Choctaw money paid to Builders Steel for goods and services to pay for personal items and trips. The sales receipts for their expenditures include the following: $855,000 at Louis Vuitton, $252,000 at Saks Fifth Avenue, $166,000 at Tiffany & Company. And those trips? $147,000 were spent on exclusive resorts. There was even a 1-week hunting trip to New Mexico that cost an additional $97,000. But none of the money Lori was spending went toward her property taxes on her home. Lori Parsons still owes $41,000 in property taxes for 2012. We wanted to know why she isn't paying. We started by calling.
This is Marla with Channel 2.
Then we went to her work.
I'm Marla with Channel 2, and I'm here to see Lori Parsons. We tried to catch up with Lori Parsons at her 10,000 square foot home that's on the market for $2.6 million. In fact, it's so big, our camera can't even capture the house in one shot.
The Parsons weren't home. Neither Lori nor Brent Parsons returned our calls, but their attorney did give us this statement saying she has every intention of meeting her property tax obligations and will make every effort with her remaining resources to satisfy her obligations. The $41,000 she owes in back taxes on this home could put another teacher and a dozen computers into Jenks Public Schools.
The U.S. Attorney's Office expects the Parsons to be sentenced in about 6 months, and they could face time behind bars. If they don't pay their property taxes, then the Jenks Public Schools District may not ever see their share of the money.
Thanks, Marley. You've really made us see just how one person not paying their taxes can affect a school.
We've been talking about how people and businesses not paying up hurt Tulsa County, but delinquent property taxes hurt school children all across Green Country, especially in the more rural counties. Here's what's owed in back property taxes in other counties. You can see here, combined, Pawnee, Osage, and Rogers counties are owed nearly $2.5 million. Creek and Wagner counties are owed more than $2,300,000.
Property owners owe Okmulgee County more than $600,000 in back taxes. 2 News reporter Michelle Lowry goes to an Okmulgee public school and talks to the district's littlest students to see what they're facing without the money.
And remember, it's going up and down or sideways.
These second graders are tackling math.
The sum is the answer to an addition problem.
The problem of delinquent property taxes adds up to big shortfalls for these kids. It would take tens of thousands of little fingers to count the tens of thousands of dollars owed right now to Okmulgee Public Schools.
Wow, that's surprising. It makes me kind of sad.
Look at all of the different public school districts in Okmulgee County, and the amount due, more than $661,000.
I'm just really floored at how much money that, should have been collected.
Jackie McGirt is a well-loved 23-year veteran in the classroom.
Thank you.
That she's really, really nice. Sometimes she'll help us do work, like math.
Hello, do you hear O?
Okmulgee public school teachers and administrators say those thousands in delinquent taxes are sorely needed.
every penny we can get, man, we can use.
Because there aren't enough teachers, computers, or books.
Textbooks are a big thing.
Principal Ware says even tables and chairs are a challenge.
We'll scrounge around, we scavenge, we go to other buildings.
In this pre-K class, the tables were collected from other sites. The chairs are brand new because parents held a fundraiser.
The next step, sitting on the floor, and we don't want that to happen. So let's pay our taxes.
What kind of math problem?
It's not just individuals and businesses. The state of Oklahoma owes more than $7,000 in delinquent taxes in Okmulgee County alone.
And that's what's sad, is because just because it's the state that owes the taxes, there's no penalties there.
GLAD, is that a thing?
That's right. The state's delinquent tax bill is not subject to penalties.
So the consequences go back on our students, and that's not right.
So what do we call the answer to a subtraction?
Michelle Lowry, 2 News works for you.
Now, as Michelle mentioned, even the state of Oklahoma is behind in paying property taxes. But their problem with paying late is bigger than you think.
When we come back, we'll show you how Oklahoma owes the most of all in late property taxes and how the state gets away with being late year after year.
You're watching 2 News Investigators, tracking your tax dollars.
Welcome back to our 2 News Investigators Tracking Your Tax Dollars special.
We all know that schools are struggling financially, and part of that is because of the millions of dollars in unpaid property taxes by homeowners and businesses.
Now, every homeowner is supposed to pay taxes on their property, but there are some businesses that are exempt from paying property taxes. You see, the state offers these exemptions to bring business and jobs into Oklahoma. So who pays those exempted taxes?
Marla Carter shows us who's supposed to pay the taxes on those exempt properties, and they owe the most in unpaid taxes.
Go ahead and go to the Start menu. Property taxes help your child's classroom. Paid by property owners like Robertson Tire.
We have 17 properties in Tulsa County and 5 in Rogers County and 1 in Wagner County.
And all of that adds up to $150,000 a year in property taxes.
We have to take care of our schools. Our schools are extremely important.
While Robertson and many businesses across Green Country pay that bill on time, thousands are late. So who's the very worst offender? The one who owes the most in unpaid property taxes for Tulsa County? That offender, the state of Oklahoma.
So the state of Oklahoma doesn't have a deadline of when that money's due.
That's right.
I don't know how they can get away with that.
The 2 News investigators pored over delinquent property taxes and found the state of Oklahoma still owes Tulsa County $1.4 million for last year's taxes.
Do you think it's fair that the state has more time than everybody else to pay? Is that fair?
The state is providing the money, and we could not be constitutionally in a position to make that payment if there are no funds available.
Jeff Spellman is over property taxes for the state. The fund he's talking about pays the property taxes for hundreds of Oklahoma businesses. It's a reimbursement.
So here's the problem. It's a math problem. The state owes 50-some counties a total of $46 million. The fund to pay for those property taxes only gets $20 million a year, half of what it needs, leaving $26 million that the state can't pay on time. How can you possibly pay that $46 million in 1 year?
Usually that money will be available probably by January of the following year.
January of the following year. That's a year after your property taxes are due.
What kind of word was that?
The tax commission says its hands are tied, and it can only reimburse schools and counties once it gets more money.
The state of Oklahoma can't pay to the counties any money they don't have. That's part of the budget balance amendment. So we have to wait until there's money available.
Yes, Micah.
Meanwhile, schools wait. At her State of the State last month, Governor Mary Fallin proclaimed education was one of her top goals.
We've tried in my budget over the years to protect education as much as possible.
Knowing her mission is to fund education, we wanted to ask the governor why the state takes so long paying its tax bill to fund schools. For weeks, we tried to set up an interview and get answers from the state's top government official. But her office repeatedly turned us down. Finally, we caught up with her at her State of the State address and asked her about the delay in payment. She said a fix
is up to the legislature.
I'm always happy to look at any issue. It's hard to make a judgment call on legislation until it's written and until the issue is thoroughly discussed, but I'm certainly open to listen to any type of suggestions of how we can improve that for our communities and certainly for education.
Now, Rusty and Karen, we did ask Governor Fallon to join us today on our show, but she declined. However, her spokesperson did send us a statement. He said the governor is happy to review this matter with the legislature in the next legislative session and to work on developing a funding mechanism that better serves county governments.
Now, the state gets no penalty for paying on time, so there's no interest on those unpaid taxes.
And unlike the state, if a person or business doesn't pay their taxes on time, they get a financial penalty every month they're late.
Yeah, but that's not all. If you don't pay for 3.5 years, then your property goes up for public auction. This crowd of hundreds is here to find a bargain. As properties are rattled off for auction.
First experience, it was good. My husband had to hold my hand down.
500 properties went up for sale in June. All of them were delinquent, not paying their property taxes for 3.5 years.
I feel horrible and yet lucky at the same time, because I feel horrible that they couldn't afford the taxes or refuse to pay the taxes. But if their loss is my gain.
The Tulsa County Treasurer's Office says the auction is the last resort. If people are late paying their taxes, there's a 1.5% penalty tacked on every month. So for $1,000, that's $15 a month. And that adds up fast. After a year, it totals 18% interest. But that lasts for 3.5 years. If it's longer than that, 600. This is where the properties end up, on the auction block.
The taxes ultimately get paid, because if they don't, the property gets sold.
That money, again, goes back to schools. And without those dollars, the Treasurer's Office says schools suffer.
And those taxes are budgeted based on being collected in the year of levy. So if they're delinquent, it has a significant budgetary effect on the taxing entities.
That's why the Treasurer's Office works hard to recoup what it can at auction, so schools aren't left waiting on the highest bidder.
Penalties and unpaid taxes are piling up while money for schools goes down.
But one state lawmaker hopes to at least change the way the state of Oklahoma pays its tax bill.
Oh, we definitely need to find a way to pay our bills on time. We owe that to the citizens.
We'll talk to him about his plan when we come back. And we're joined by State Senator Sean Burge from Claremore. Thanks for being with us today.
It's an honor and privilege to be here with you, Russ.
All right, let's talk a little bit about this situation with school funding and the fact that the state owes more money to the schools than anybody else. How did this come about that you found out about it, and kind of what was your reaction initially?
Well, I knew about the exemption, but I didn't know the size and breadth of the exemption until Marla brought it to my attention with Channel 2. And, you know, basically what we're doing is we are not paying our bills to the state of Oklahoma. We're allocating $20 million to pay $46 million worth of bills to counties.
What is it going to take to be able to get the state to pay their bills and be able to lift Oklahoma up when it comes to funding for education?
Well, I'm looking at maybe a legislative fix for this particular problem, but the problem is larger in not properly funding public education generally. And so I think we have to make it a priority. I mean, by some measures, we're 49th in funding public education.
Yeah.
We're better than that.
So next year, you're going to propose something and see where it goes from there, and hopefully we can solve this problem, pay our bills, and help kids get the education that they deserve.
That's the plan.
All right, we'll see how it goes. State Senator Sean Burge, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Oklahoma schools just started the new school year. Tulsa Public Schools did it, 40 fewer teachers than they should have. They did it being short textbooks and computers.
Well, from the state of Oklahoma to big businesses to individual homeowners, more than $12 million in property taxes to help pay for those teachers, those textbooks, and those computers still hasn't been paid today. Our 2 News investigators will continue to keep track of who's paying and who's not throughout the school year.
Thank you for watching. Good night.